I didn't even get the back half of that. Yeah, every single job, that's not what entry level means. Entry level means entry level. I see too many folks pass up opportunities or not apply for things that they want, that they would be really, really good at because they're scared that they don't have the right kind of experience or the right numbers of experience, the right years of experience. Apply, let them sort it out. If you're applying for somewhere small and there's a good chance that an actual human is looking at your resume, they're gonna make the call. Like, they're gonna look at the experience that you do have and figure out how relevant it is, how applicable it is, and they're gonna make a call because they'd rather see 1 year of good experience than 10 years of adequate boring experience. That being said, unfortunately, so many companies use forms, so many of them use proprietary software, they filter out resumes just based on that number. So one of the things that I'll talk about in resumes today is as much as you can obscure some details on your resume to beat some of those filters, the better chance you'll get of actually getting into the short stack of resumes on someone's desk. I've seen them use years of experience as a major metric. I've seen them use your zip code, your address, your phone number, area code, if they're trying to filter out for local folks, which is something I've seen. Even jobs that are remote, they'll say we're absolutely 100% remote. But in the event we're not remote a year from now, we sure would love if you only live 2 miles from where we're hiring, and that's one of the ways that they filter things out. They'll never tell you that, but it's something I see. So don't be intimidated by the years required. If you think you can do that job and do it well, go into an interview and start your stuff.
How much is getting a job is knowing the right people? Like, I heard if you know the right people, they put you on a special pipeline, like a separate queue for getting interviewed, or you skip a step.
So the phrase is that I've heard, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That can get you in the door, but if you don't know how to do the job, you will be shown the door just as quickly in the opposite direction. So knowing someone will absolutely give you an advantage. It'll give you a little extra consideration. In a situation where you have 2 years of the requested 3 years of experience, if someone's batting for you, if they put you in the short stack, it can absolutely help. It can't hurt, but you can't rely entirely on that. If you get into a room and everyone you're working with finds out you're here because you know Bob, no one's gonna wanna work with you, especially if you don't know what you're doing.
On the subject of robots reading resumes, how can you be sure that the resume you are submitting is not being scanned incorrectly? Because oftentimes I've found that my resume, when the website kind of auto-completes the information, because you have to fill it out anyway, manually, it will try to read it itself, and it will be completely, all the information will be in the wrong place. How can you be sure that that's not a major contributing factor to not hearing back?
It's a major pain in the butt, especially if you're sending out hundreds, if not thousands of resumes, but individually going through their proprietary nonsense and punching all of that stuff in directly is the best way to avoid problems like that.
Top tip for that, have a plain text version of all of the text on your resume in a separate Google Doc, in a separate Word document, a notes document, without any kind of formatting, any kind of, the layout that you would have in a traditional resume. Have that, copy and paste it directly into the boxes so that you don't have to type it out every time.
Good call, absolutely. Some things, and I've done this myself literally, but some things I've seen folks do is not listing a physical mailing address because no one's mailing you paper for the most part, so you don't have to put your physical address. Also, it's a privacy concern, so if anyone gives you a hard time to say, I don't share that information with everyone I'm applying to. I've known folks who have used Google Voice or other services to get local area codes when they're applying for jobs. So folks from Chicago who want to work at Microsoft or Amazon or somewhere inside of Seattle, they're getting local Seattle area codes for phone numbers to try and beat that.
You can do that through Google Voice.
So that works pretty well. In terms of other things, there's some things you're not going to be able to obscure. So if your entire resume is Chicago local, if it says you went to a Loyola High School, you went to the Ball for college, and all of your jobs are here, they're going to figure you're from Chicago. So there's not a lot of ways to beat that sometimes in terms of experience. They'll figure you out. But always spin something I've seen well in interviews. It doesn't necessarily work in the first blush for sending in resumes, but if you can work into your cover letter or your actual interview that you're passionate about the city for independent reasons that have nothing to do with the job, that might be something to give you a little extra consideration. So if you're moving to Seattle and you tell them that you're trying to get away from Chicago winter, or you're really passionate passionate about sourdough bread bowls and chowder at High Place Market.
It's funny, I'm from Seattle.
So what's the inside cool tip from Seattle to kind of prove to the locals that you're passionate about it beyond just the things that we all know about? Besides saying I love Starbucks, how do we convince folks from Seattle?
I mean, I feel like the main difference between coastal places and the Midwest is first of all the ocean, and second of all just like the mountains. When I moved here for the first time in 2017, I was really freaked out that you could just kind of cross the street and then look down and then see until the horizon line. I thought that didn't happen, and so I was really freaked out by that.
Definitely. So if you miss hills, that could be a good way to go to Seattle.
Yeah, the
We don't
feeling
have
of
those here.
uphill in my body, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have those answers kind of the same, whether it's local or nationally, but I think finding things, if it's on Indeed, if it's on LinkedIn, chances are it's filled already, especially with smaller studios. So the best place to find out if there's an opening somewhere is going to be your personal network. It's going to be word of mouth. It's going to be, I know Matt Parker was here a little earlier talking about the IGA Holiday Mixer, talking about GDC, bumping into people who work places and getting the juice out of them to say, oh, we might be hiring for a new art position. We've got an entry-level gig for this or that. We haven't posted it yet, but are you interested? Like, that's the inside track. It's a hard thing to replicate if you're just getting in and you don't have a network yet. That can be hard. So one of the places I see people talking about jobs before they make it to LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, or any of those traditional avenues is Twitter, Instagram, Discord channels. People will say, hey, anyone interested in working at this company? I just heard my hiring manager or my boss say that we're posting a new gig soon. Like, PM me for details before we reach out to the normal people. Like, that's usually one of the ways. What do you think?
Of DeFRAG, and they should be sending that out in the post-event communication. There's also workwithindies.com, and there's also animatedjobs.com for animators and people who are interested in working with independent companies and studios.
Should you email studios and ask if they're hiring for a role that isn't explicitly listed? Is that possible?
You could. It depends on. Here's the kind of thing. Answering a question like that is kind of like giving dating advice. I can give some general advice, but it's completely going to depend on you and the person you're reaching out to, and if you have that special connection and all of that. So, I've heard some hiring managers and people at studios say that they're very flattered and that they appreciate when students or people trying to get into the industry reach out to them directly, are very kind and very respectful of their time. So if you reached out to someone via DMs on Twitter, or if you sent them an email to their professional email address and said, hello, I'm a student at DePaul University, I really want to get into this industry, I really respect these things you made or things you did. If you have 10 minutes for me to call you or meet you for coffee, I'd love to just pick your brain for a second, and I am very passionate about a very specific thing. Most folks in this industry are very receptive to those kinds of emails. They want to pay it forward. They want to be kind. That being said, if it's something as simple as like, hey, are you hiring? Hey, I want a job. They get a million a day, so they're going to ignore you and just leave you unread.
When it comes to game resumes for the game industry, regardless of what you're going into it for, is it better to be project-centric than to be position-centric with your past experience? So for instance, is it better to have an explicit list of projects you've worked on that weren't necessarily professional, but you've worked on them and have seen them to completion, rather than listing on your resume actual jobs you've had, whether or not you're trying to spin those jobs to fit the goals or what they're looking for with those positions that you're trying to apply for?
It depends. It's my favorite lawyer answer for everything is it depends. If you're going into a smaller indie studio, they might want to find a Jack or Jane of all trades. They might find someone who's a generalist who can handle a lot of things, especially in a fast-paced, versatile environment where they don't have the budget to hire 50 people who all specialize in things. They might want a generalist who can do everything pretty okay. I've noticed larger studios or larger gigs, they want the specialists. They want the hired guns who are very good at a particular thing. So if you are the absolute best in Maya, if you are the absolute best in VO or QA or something else, you're going to have to kind of play the field you're on for that. It changes. And I know that's not really a solid answer when you're trying to put together resumes, but one of the general bits of feedback I'll give all of you today is you're probably going to have to customize your resumes or portfolios for any job that you're applying to, especially based on their credentials. Try and work a all those buzzwords that they have in the job posting back into your resume, back into your cover letter, so that it trips all the SEO, so it trips all of their metrics, but also so that they know you're speaking to them. I've heard from hiring managers, they get very bored when they see the cookie cutter resume or cookie cutter cover letter that says like, I'm very interested in your studio. You know, so they want to know you want to work at NetherRealm. They want to know that Ed Boon is your favorite person in the world. They want to know that you love Goro. Like they want to be. I don't want to say they want you to drink the Kool-Aid, but that's kind of how it is sometimes. So to answer your question, it depends both.
Just building off of that question, I have experience as a manager from one of my jobs, and I'm an animation major. Should I keep that, like, let's say if it comes down to it, should I keep that on? Because it's a good thing to have on the resume, but at the same time, if I'm going into animation, which is a very project-based thing, should I just have nothing but projects listed on my resume, or should I also include that, like, I was a manager here, or like I did something over here?
I think it's relevant when it's relevant. I think like team lead experience, management experience, it translates to anything in any discipline. So if they know that you're someone who doesn't need to have someone looking over their shoulder, and if someone gives you a to-do list, you can manage it on your own. Like that can only help you. It's one of those things where if it becomes less relevant and space is a factor, 'cause that's another thing, is sometimes you want to keep your resume short and sweet, you want to cut a couple things. It's going to be a judgment call for how much it's going to factor in. Also, it might be something that you could work into a cover letter. You can, instead of using space on your resume, you can work it into your cover letter that as a team lead, as a manager, as inspiration to everyone around you, you did X and Y and Z, and that's relevant somehow to the job, but it doesn't take up real estate on your resume. Does that make sense?
I know a lot of these jobs have like multiple levels of interviews that you have to get through. Do you have any tips for like getting to those next levels and like not being like dropped early and stuff?
That is a good question. I've seen it go a lot of different ways. Sometimes jobs don't know exactly what they're looking for. Employers don't know exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for that first round interview. It's usually going to be pretty basic. They're just going to ask you to confirm some basic things on your resume. So it might be, did you in fact have this GPA, or did you have this experience?
And like you can actually be reached at that phone number.
That's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and also it might not be someone who's even on the team, depending on.
Yeah, it might be a recruiter from like an outside HR company. Sometimes what companies do is they're like, nobody here has the time to like go through all these people, so I'm gonna hire an outside company, we're gonna post the job, route all the resumes to that third-party person, and then they're gonna do some pre-screening and then send the people who are actually legit over to us, so it like reduces the staff from this to this. So I think that's where professional communication really comes in. It's good to, after your interview, send like a follow-up email saying thank you for their time, send them your resume again, and then maybe, make sure that you tell them that you're available if they have any follow-up questions, and also make sure to ask questions at the end of your interview, and not just when will I hear back, or like what are next steps. Asking good questions at the end of your interview is a great way to prove like that you have that extra special something, and also that you're familiar with the company, and it's also a good litmus test to see if the person who's interviewing you actually works at the company or not. Because if you research the company before your interview, and then at the end of your first round, ask a really specific question about like, hey, recently I've seen on your website that you've been like launching these projects. What do you think about like this specific spec, or like what do you think about this specific change in your management? And if they're like, oh, I'm just a third party, like I don't really know a lot, but you seem to, then that's great. And if they actually do work at the company, then they're just delighted that somebody has noticed something that they've done, so it can be the catalyst for another more meaningful conversation later on.
What counts as a good question to ask after?
Wonderful. You can find a whole handout dedicated to asking great questions on the Career Center Career Library, and you can find that by putting in DePaul Career Center Library on Google.
Yeah, do some heavy stalking on anyone that.
Oh, heavy stalking.
Absolutely heavy, not casual, serious. So figure out who you're actually working with, figure out who's doing the interview, and look up everything they've done. So find their LinkedIn and everything else.
Thank you, everyone. I have to go.
Thank you so much. I have nowhere to begin. So let's see, definitely stalk them on LinkedIn, try and figure out what they are doing. So if they're a producer, if they're a team lead, if they're a studio head, whoever they are, like figure out what games they've shipped, figure out what things they're passionate about. Like don't figure out where they play golf on the weekend and stalk them that way, but like find out things they're passionate about. And if they're, so for example, if you're interviewing for art and all they do is 3D art, make all of your questions about 3D art. If they're shipping fighting games, ask what their influences are. Some questions that I've encouraged my students to use in interviews is the way that it usually goes format-wise, and especially in a first interview, is they'll ask you your name, they'll ask you like 2 questions about your resume. They'll ask you a very esoteric, weird question about like, when was a time that you experienced difficulty? How did that go? And all of the questions are designed to just let you talk or let you puff or let you kind of flex anything that you've done. And then after that, there's usually a random one.